Okay, I expect folks will continue to filter in as we go, but I want to get us started, at least with a little introduction. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Clayton Hurd. I'm the Director of Professional Development and Engaged Scholarship at Campus Compact. And we're really pleased to have our facilitator and our group of panelists here today. I'm going to start by introducing Star Plaxton-Moore, who is the Director of Community Engaged Learning at the Leo T. McCarthy Center for Public Service and the Common Good at the University of San Francisco. Star is a great scholar and practitioner in her own right. We are very happy that she has agreed to come on with Campus Compact over the next year and serve in a fellowship at what we call our Faculty Development Fellow for the year. And in that role, she's collaborating with us to really help us develop and facilitate a range of faculty professional development offerings that are focused on key issues in equity-centered, community-engaged teaching and learning. And we're very fortunate to have her. She is the publisher of this book. If you haven't seen it, you might think about picking it up. We published this right before the pandemic, so I feel like it may have gotten a little bit lost in the shuffle. But it's a great book on, it's called The Craft of Community Engaged Teaching and Learning, a Guide for Faculty Development. It's co-authored by Star and Marshall Welch. And it's great for folks thinking about course redesign, but also thinking more broadly about what it means to be a scholar practitioner and a community engaged scholar. And it comes with an online sort of reflection activity guide. So for folks who do faculty development, it's a great resource for thinking about working with faculty and planning courses. And so we're really happy that Star will be working with us. And at the end of this session, I'll talk a little bit more about other faculty development activities we'll have coming up in the future over the next year. Again, that Star's helping us build out. It will be great for both you and folks at your institution who may want to get involved in course redesign, thinking about community partnerships, really high quality community partnerships and other kinds of workshops and virtual seminars that we'll be sponsoring. So without much further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Star. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Clayton. Hi, friends. I'm really honored to be a Campus Compact Fellow this year, and starting off with this panel, it was really fun to kind of reflect back on the creative process of working with Marshall to co-author the book, The Craft of Community Engaged Teaching and Learning. And as many of you probably know, Marshall has retired and has moved on to pursue other interests like writing fiction. So if you're looking for a good fiction book, I think he's been self-publishing some cool stories. And he sort of left me in a good way to steward the budding opportunities that have emerged from the book being published. You know, when we wrote the book, it was really about integrating scholarship in our field and outside of our field that had been informing our work and the work of our peers. It was about reflecting on our own experience of facilitating faculty development. And then we also drew upon some prior collaborative research that we had done where we were trying to map faculty development practices in the field of community engagement. And just a little behind the scenes glimpse, we actually started the creative process for this book with a 2-day retreat at Marshall's home in Oregon. And it was really a joyful opportunity for us to think creatively and have really deep and lovely discussions while going for walks and blueberry picking and sitting in the sun on Marshall's patio. But there was also a great deal of tension, particularly as we started, you know, in the writing of the book and really coming to realize just, you know, that there were definitely differences in how we understood community engagement and faculty development, and really having to kind of grapple and work through those things. And I share that because so much of the deep learning I had in this process was through those sort of interpersonal tensions and interrogations of like where we were coming from. And how to kind of make sense of that and figure out how to manage that in the book. So I share all of that because I have a lot of ambivalence about publishing. As a consumer and a scholar and practitioner, I love texts, right? I buy the books, I print the articles, I highlight and write in them, I quote them, I hold on to them, right? I love the written word dearly, and there's so much benefit from it. These texts weave together themes across existing scholarship to advance new ideas. They become comprehensive resources that we can turn to as we're learning or teaching. We can read and interpret and apply them in so many ways and put them in conversation with other texts and experiences. But the drawbacks of the written word, coming from a perspective of both an author and a consumer, is that the information is static and it represents a particular moment in time, in a particular context, and reflects the author's biases and the limits of our experience and expertise. So while Marshall and I tried to synthesize some general principles and frameworks and practices that we felt a broad range of folks could draw on, we also knew that faculty development is really context specific, and it has to account for the culture of the institution and the departments, the geographic limitations and opportunities, and individual faculty motivations and expertise. And so actually, I love that we, in sort of simultaneously with connecting with the texts and the publications, that we do these kinds of things, right? The webinars, the conferences, the learning communities, where we really get to make our learning more relational and dynamic and iterative. And there's so much beauty in, the oral traditions as a complement to the written word, where we can really engage real time with more diverse perspectives and areas of expertise. And then the other thing is that in my experience, the people who are doing some of the most creative and revolutionary work are often too busy with that work to write and publish on it. But these are folks that we should be learning from. And so we're really lucky to have some creative faculty developers who are also very busy people. So I just want to honor that they've made time for us today. We have these folks with us on our panel to share their insights. So our format is that we'll do about a 40-minute panel discussion, and then we'll have about 15 minutes of Q&A with participants. So as questions come up for you, you can put them in the chat, and then we will come back to them during the Q&A period. And then we'll have about 20 minutes to do breakout room discussions. So obviously there's a lot of wisdom and expertise in this room that we want to make sure you all get a chance to share with each other. So that will be the opportunity, is during the breakout room discussions. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists, and we'll launch into the first question. I first want to welcome Tessa Hill, who is the Associate Vice Provost of Academic Programs in the Office of Public Scholarship and Engagement at UC Davis. I also want to welcome Joyce Mccauley, Executive Director for the Center for Community Engagement and Professor in the School of Teaching and Learning at Sam Houston State University. I want to welcome my friend John Loggins, who's the Director of Community Engaged Learning at the Mulvaney Center for Community Awareness and Social Action at University of San Diego. And then Doug Strawler, Associate Professor in the Department of Strategic Communication and Media at Slippery Rock University of Pennsylvania. And so to begin, each of our panelists is going to share anything else about themselves that they want you to know, and then share some context about their particular institution and describe what faculty development for community engaged teaching and scholarship looks like. And I think we'll just go in the order that I introduced you. So we'll start with Tessa, and then Joyce, John, and then Doug.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Star and Clayton, for organizing, and thank you all for being here today. So my name is Tessa Hill. I'm Associate Vice Provost in Public Scholarship and Engagement at UC Davis. And we are a university-wide unit that serves every discipline, every department, every school at our university. And on the specific front of faculty development, I guess I'll highlight two things, and I can always come back and tell you more about our office in other contexts, but I'll highlight that we offer 2 faculty fellows programs. They are each 6-month-long programs. One is focused on community engaged learning, and one is focused on public scholarship. And for each of those, we meet monthly with our faculty fellows. We have set topics and curriculum that we have developed, which I'm happy to tell you more about. We also bring in guest speakers. And it also becomes a space in these 3-hour meetings where we workshop ideas. So each of the fellows, for example, in the community engaged learning program, are bringing the courses that they are developing or proposing. And as we work through the curriculum of the program, they are getting a lot of peer support and peer workshopping on those ideas. And then we mirror the same in our public scholarship faculty fellows program. Those folks are working on manuscripts or book chapters or maybe proposals for grant funding, and we workshop them together. Happy to tell you more about that, but I'll hand off to the next panelist.
Okay, so I'm Joyce Mccauley, and I'm part-time executive director of the Center for Community Engagement and part-time professor. So it's really full-time in the center, but never mind, nobody cares about that. Okay, so actually this is our 10th year as a center, so we've come a long way. And so I've been through this whole history of the center, so it's pretty cool. We're located in Huntsville, and I wanted to tell you that the county that we're living in is very poor. So a lot of the city and a lot of the county depends on a lot of the community engagement that comes from this university and our students. So it's a big thing here about community engagement, but it hasn't been, anyway, we're getting more and more into more of the Carnegie definition of what community engagement is, so that's good. So what do we do for community? Well, we've done a lot of things over 10 years. We've done the fellows, we've done the workshops for faculty, we do all that. But what we find is most effective is working one-on-one with faculty. So we do a lot of that stuff. Depending on how much money we get, how well I can beg for money, depends on how much we can do on a larger scale for faculty. But I would say most of our most effective work for faculty development happens one-on-one. So more about that later.
Thank you, Joyce. Peace and love, y'all. My name is John Loggins. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Director of Community Engaged Learning over at the University of San Diego. A little bit about me. I feel that, service and community has always been kind of crucial in my life. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, served in Jamaica for a couple of years. I am not a San Diego native as an Air Force brat, but my formative years, high school and college, were all in San Diego. Mostly lived in a lot of the Black and brown communities as we now serve as an institution. So those are my communities. Those are near and dear to me. And I feel like from my role, I get to advocate on behalf of those community partners and those communities in general. USD itself is a relatively small private Catholic institution that sits atop a hill that kind of looks like a castle or a fortress. So we have some natural barriers and obstacles that kind of keep us from the community. Our center's been around for over 33 years now. I think we just had our 30th 3 years ago. It's all just before COVID. So we've been around for a minute. Personally, I'm starting my 21st year in the center. So I've been there for a minute myself. When I started, I feel like we were very much traditional service learning and very plug and play. We did as much as we could to make it as simple for faculty as possible. We held all the partnerships. We gave them this list, like, here's some partners that you can choose. And they may have never met the faculty or the community partners at all. And it was reflected in how the students showed up. I think as we evolved as a center, we took service out of our name. We became a Center for Community Awareness and Social Action, became a lot more deliberate about what that looks like. And that kind of entailed an ongoing process of kind of a culture shift in how we choose to engage with our faculty and how we want to really have them be engaged with our community. And we've done a number of things in quite a few different ways that I think some can be innovative and some could be just flat out, failures that if you can learn from, I'm happy to share as well. But I will get into some of those as we move further along. But I'm glad to be here, and thanks to Star and Clayton for putting us all together.
All right. Thank you. As introduced earlier, my name is Doug Stroller. I'm an associate professor here at Slippery Rock University of Pennsylvania. We're about 45 minutes north of Pittsburgh if you're trying to figure out where little old Slippery Rock is. We did have the moment a couple years ago where Dr. Phil made a little joke about where Slippery Rock is and if it's actually a real university. So we have a nice t-shirt in the bookstore about that. But other than that, in terms of service learning, I am in the Department of Strategic Communication and Media here at Slippery Rock. It was a couple years ago, and I will be talking about the service learning faculty learning community model that we have here that I got introduced to the director of community engaged learning, Jeffrey Ratliff, where he later brought me on. While I didn't get to go have blueberries and enjoy his house like Star, he brought me on, and I got to serve as the service learning faculty fellow for the office from 2019 to 20. Once COVID hit, unfortunately, they did away with the fellowship temporarily, but I still have stayed on as a service learning faculty associate. And that also is part of 5 other faculty members here on campus, which I'll talk again about that model a little bit here later as well. But yeah, today I just wanted to talk to you in a little bit about what Slippery Rock does in terms of our FLC model, as well as some of the support tied to our HIPS designation here at Slippery Rock, as well as the community engaged learning faculty associates that Jeffrey has put together here.
Doug, before we move forward, can you just tell everyone what HIPS stands for?
Oh, I'm sorry, high impact practices. So yeah, so at our university here, we have different high impact practices that you can, once you complete the FLC for that HIPS, you can actually have your course HIPS designated. So the students see it, the faculty see it when it comes down to it. Sorry.
No, thanks. I think for some people it's familiar and maybe others not so much. So my next question is about barriers and motivations for faculty. There's definitely existing scholarship and research in our field about what motivates faculty to do community engaged teaching and research, what barriers they encounter. But of course, I think most of that research was obviously published pre-pandemic and a few years back, and so many things are always changing. So what we'd love to hear from you is really, in your own practice at your institution, what do you see right now as the most salient barriers and motivators for faculty to do community engaged teaching and research at your campus? And this one, is really open to anyone. So whoever wants to pop in to start. Barriers and motivators for faculty.
Well, I guess I'll start. So I bet everybody agrees that one of the biggest barriers would be faculty reward system. So we do all this work and, it's not on any kind of promotion and tenure packet. And I mean, that's not true here, but that is a huge barrier. That's that was one of the biggest barriers we had here, but we've been working on that. So that's going to change. But I will tell you another barrier that when you first asked that, Star, I was thinking, what's another barrier? I think the barrier for us is the fact that I don't have enough bandwidth. And I said earlier, what makes a difference when we're talking about why faculty do this? It's for them to understand the big picture. Why do we do this? And to get them committed and motivated to want to, we're a public institution. I know, John, you're in the private Catholic, and it's sometimes, everybody gives and, holy and save everybody, private institution. But in a public institution, sometimes we forget we exist for the public good. And so what does that mean? And how do we do that? And so my job in the center mostly is getting faculty to understand the big picture, not only faculty, but administrators, deans, provosts. What does that mean? And how are we doing it? And so a barrier for me is the fact that I don't have a big enough staff. I started with just me. That was the center and my office. And now it's grown. I've got 4 staff people, and but it's not enough, because for me, what makes a difference is change happens with people talking to people over time. That's what causes change. And so I need people. I don't necessarily need money, although don't tell anybody that. But I mostly need people who get it, and talking to people to get them to get it. So that's my biggest barrier.
I can glom on there. Thank you, Joyce, and thank you, Star, for providing the questions in advance. Because I was thinking about this, and and to kind of follow up what Joyce was saying, people who get it, and for a long time, and I'll just name this too, and in case there's any other administrators that do community engagement work that may struggle to work with faculty a little bit. Sometimes the biggest obstacle was myself and my own confidence in the field. It's like when you're set up to work with faculty and they're the subject matter experts in their field and they see you as an administrator. I'm not saying all campuses are like this, but sometimes that culture on our campus feels prohibitive until you feel like you have either earned your stripes or you can make yourself feel confident about it. It's part of it I know is my own to hold, whether it be imposter syndrome, but a lot of it is systemic too. And I know our campus culture isn't the only one that has that. But in saying that, like knowing that the work that we do is valuable, having to Joyce's point that know it and say like this is valuable work, and how do we convey that across the line, and how do we get people on boarded with that is a big part of the work that I do now. I would agree that the rank and tenure process is something that is an inhibitor in a lot of ways, because it's not always it's valued in our mission statement and our value statement, but when it comes to like the ARC review or anything like that, it's not always taken into consideration. So that is a barrier. But I think one of the other big barriers is we shifted from being plug and play and trying to get our faculty more involved with a justice orientation to include anti-racist language in our work. We have found lots of faculty really resonating with that, but also a lot of faculty that, I'm in engineering faculty, I'm in the School of Business, and I don't know how to have the reflections or have the conversations with our students when they come back to us and say, I was scared when I went to that site, and I don't know how to process that. And so for us to be able to, identify what it is that's kind of holding them back, either from doing it or from doing it well while they're, participating in community engagement. And I think, for us, it's been developing workshops that cater specifically to how to their needs that kind of help us get them past those specific barriers. As I'll agree, it is kind of a one-on-one situation. Something that's up for this faculty may not be up with that faculty, and the same with our students. So I've often said I'm an educator, but I'm also an artist, because you never know what's going to be in front of you. Like I wish the same thing worked for this faculty, the same thing that worked for this student, but it's never the case that happens. And so like to be able to be adaptable, work with what's emerging in front of you, and responsive to the needs and kind of the dynamics that exists currently, and to be attentive to like those political and historical contexts of our city looking like a fortress in a part of the world where, Catholic missions didn't do a lot of good. So there's a lot of other baggage there that also can feel like an obstacle sometimes, but having open and clear and honest conversations about those things, I think, have been helpful. And I'll stop there lest I blather on.
John, before other people might want to pipe up, but I just wanted to lift up something that I think is really interesting that we've seen at our institution as well, is that as you move toward a more explicit social justice orientation to the work, or an explicit anti-racism orientation to the work, it becomes a barrier for some and a motivator for others, right? Whether the barrier is, I don't know enough to feel like I can do this confidently, or this doesn't align with my own perspective or ideologies. And then also the motivator, where faculty who before were like, oh, service learning seems kind of problematic and, you know, in the way it was sort of originally designed or run at our institution, but now I can really grasp onto this social justice approach and really, you know, get into it and make it real in my classes. So just, I think that's a really interesting tension where as we go down that path, it creates barriers for some and motivation for others to jump into it. So I don't know, Tessa, Doug, do either of you want to speak to this question as well?
Sure, yeah, I love the discussion so far, and I'll just say I really appreciate Joyce calling out that we want to be surrounded by people who get it. And so I think our office really enjoys addressing that particular barrier by helping faculty find other faculty who are also doing this. So finding peer communities of support is a big part of our mission and our goal. I completely agree with all of the barriers that have been listed off already, and I feel like we've been working very hard at them. I'll just say on the motivations piece that I work for Vice Provost Micheal Rios. Some of you may know him, and he has a paper coming out soon. It's currently in revision that's about motivations that's based on interviews of our own faculty. So it's sort of an institution specific look at what motivates faculty to do this work. And part of what he shows is that it occurs across this system all the way from personal to interpersonal to like broader organizational and community motivators. And so we really work very hard at thinking about the barriers at all of those levels. And so if we can think about all of the different reasons why faculty might want to do this work, and then there's barriers in all those different categories, and then we try to target, like what can we do at each of these levels to address barriers. So I really like that you married the motivations and barriers question together, because that's definitely how we think about it.
Yeah, I mean, similar to everyone else, I think that one of the things that we find sometimes from faculty is the logistics of it, taking on that extra workload on top of everything, because one of the things that we look at is like, yeah, it's to run a course, but you are adding that extra layer, which can be, and I know for myself prior to tenure and promotion, can be intimidating as well when it comes to course evaluations, because you are kind of putting yourself out there when it comes to bringing the community in and really thinking about like if things go wrong, and it's gone wrong before with partners, like how do you keep in the back of your mind putting that gamble out there when you are relying on those student evaluations. And I'd say the other thing that comes up a lot is just the idea of like the student and community outcomes, keeping your course outcomes aligned with in thinking about community outcomes as well, has also kind of played a role in what faculty are thinking about coming into our faculty learning community.
Thank you. So my next question, I'm just going to kind of riff on this whole notion of vulnerability that Doug sort of alluded to, and just say that when I first started doing faculty development for community engaged teaching and scholarship, I inherited a curriculum that my predecessor had put together, and I just sort of started using that, right? And kept kind of using, just sort of saw it as this package that I was then supposed to like deliver the content, and wasn't really thinking about, it took some professional development for me in the early phase of my career, wasn't really thinking about principles and theories and conceptual frameworks that should really be guiding both the structure of the faculty development programming and the content and curriculum delivery and reflection and all of those things. So I have come a long way thanks to learning from others in the field. And I think, folks in this room might benefit from hearing from all of you panelists about what principles, theories, and or conceptual frameworks really guide your faculty development programming.
I can jump in here. So one of the things kind of alluded to earlier is we have here on campus the Office for Community Engaged Learning. And it's really leveraging service learning community engagement as powerful pedagogies to transform the intellectual, social, and leadership capacities of students. And one of the things that when Jeffrey came in, he wanted to create a taxonomy or a framework here. And as I'm explaining this, I'm trying to quickly grab the PDF so I can throw it into the chat here for everyone to take a look at. But one of the things that he tried to do is to establish this taxonomy here. And for our faculty learning communities, one of the things that we look at is we developed it around these 6 attribute areas. And it's taking a second for the PDF here, so I'll just kind of read them off here. So the 6 attributes based off of Hatcher, Hahn, and Bringle and the IUPUI Center for Service and Learning, reciprocal partnerships, community activities, civic competencies, diversity interactions and dialogue with others, critical reflection, and assessment. And we've kind of framed our approach to that around this. So then for our faculty learning communities, the most recent one is it's 7 sessions. The first session is just really orienting you to the faculty learning community and our approach here at Slippery Rock. And every session following focuses on one of those 6 attributes. And during those sessions, what we try to do is have what we call powerful question or questions, get the faculty thinking about it a little bit more in each of those areas. We do pre and post just to kind of get their perceptions of each attribute before the session and after the session. And then really dive into it. We want it to be hands-on with breakout rooms and applying it to each of their different disciplines. We've really seen a positive response when it comes to faculty. I guess going back to those barriers, faculty are getting to meet faculty members across campus. I can't tell you how many projects or opportunities have popped up because you meet someone in another department and they have a connection or something along those lines. So that's one of the things that we try to do here when it comes to, there's that prior thing of introducing everyone to the taxonomy here, but really diving into it. And then pre-pandemic, when I was the faculty fellow, one of the things I was asked to create was a advanced community of practice. So what that was for is if you went through the FLC and you really wanted to dive in a little bit more, what we did was we would hold 6 sessions throughout the semester. And same thing, we'd pick an attribute or 2 and they'd really dive into their application of that attribute and how they integrated it into projects, courses, and stuff along those lines.
Well, thanks, Doug. We use similar things to organize workshops, so it's nice and clear because you can just go right through your little list. But we've been doing a lot of work, like you, Tessa. Whoever that is that is doing that article, I'd be interested in seeing what he says. We have a writing group now, and we're studying faculty motivation, and we're in the final draft. And if I have to code one more interview, I'm going to kill myself. But anyway, but for our theoretical, we had to think of what grounds this motivation. So we really use Bandura. I mean, he's a tried and true. Some people disagree with him, but you know, it's that we're motivated. It's caused by, you know, our personal behavior, our environmental factors, and we've been looking more and more at the culture of the university as a huge motivator, you know. So that's why our strategic plan, that's why where's our motto, how's all this tie in, you know, so we work hard on developing changing culture because that is one of the biggest motivators. And it goes back to, you know, a lot of stuff he says, you know, it's the interaction. You're doing something because you're going to get something and you get reinforced somehow. Or so that's why faculty awards were so hard, or that, you know. So there's a lot of different motivational systems, but social cognitive theory is what we use mostly when we're talking about this sort of stuff.
I think, you know, this may be a little bit of a dated, but like I said, I've been around the block a few times with community engagement, and and then thinking about like, our transition and how we evolved as a center, and thinking about how, faculty, students, anybody experiences service, whether it be through their high school, their church, their own college educational experience. It has not necessarily always been critical. And so like for me, it's always hard to say like I can't see our office without there being Tania Mitchell's, critical versus traditional service learning. And for us to be able to, when we're working with new faculty or faculty that we're trying to onboard, to bring them into the work, for them to see what our approach is. So we're also, again, a Catholic university, so we also have a mission and ministry that does do a lot of traditional service in that end. So we have the spaciousness to kind of be a little bit distinctive in who we are as an identity as within our center. And so for us to be able to say like, we definitely have this critical lens to where we're focusing on social justice, and hopefully motivating them and inspiring them to see the work that way. And then that helps lead us into how we actually work with them and connect them with partners. I also know that as they get, as we have more and more seasoned and savvy faculty, and we're always still trying to develop ourselves as a cohort. We have a faculty council for community engagement on our campus, and I think the readings that we take on for ourselves are oftentimes recently. I'm a big Adrienne Marie Brown fan. I know many of you all are. And Lena Distilio's work on the work that we do as practitioners, and as someone who's has his master's in leadership. Leadership is also another way, because when you're thinking about social change and social justice, how do we instill some of those values? So I think there's a little bit scaffolded in terms of the theories that we use to onboard people. And then when people are really savvy and want to get on board and need the extra motivation and want to see how we can keep pushing our universities to be public good, because sometimes I do feel like it's a little bit of a back and forth and a tussle. Like, here's what we say we are, here's what we want to do. And I feel like one's a big motivating factor of the faculty that are inclined to join with our office is like, how do we work to change the culture on our campus? And that is in and of itself kind of a motivating factor, is that you have allies, you have this camaraderie among the folks that are in but not of this institution that they want to compel to do great works. And we're also a change maker campus, and most recently I'm proud to announce that we're also the home of the Place-Based Justice Network too. So we're very much trying to see this work, community engagement work, as being specifically anti-oppression work, and how do we frame that and institutionalize it that way.
It's wonderful. I don't have a lot to add because I feel like everyone has really captured also the things that we've been thinking about. We have some sort of foundational books that we use in our faculty development programs. And of course, now I'm going to add Star's book to that bookshelf. But then we tend to move from those books into a discussion of traditional versus critical community engaged work. And we also try to pull in resources from a lot of different disciplines, because we find that faculty and students need to be able to see themselves in this work. And so we've worked really hard at developing different disciplinary examples that might address the frameworks we're working on. But we sort of land in a place of focusing on mutually beneficial and co-created partnerships, and that those partnerships are change oriented and addressing power structures and hierarchies and changing systems and working towards justice. So I think that really mimics what my co-panelists have said.
Hey, I have to go back, Tessa, to what you said. You've got to add the craft, because we are in the middle of an FLC using the craft STAR. And we're having incredible conversations. And if you want to have a great framework for doing faculty development, just take any of those chapters. We're doing partnerships, chapter 7 next. But the best thing about your book, Star, are the QR codes. Oh, that's so fun. It's amazing. And some of the stuff that you put on there, I'm using it in my other classes. So yeah, you got to buy that book. You got to buy it, just saying.
Thanks, Joyce.
You didn't pay me to say that either, Star.
That's it. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I also just want to lift up all of these other sort of frameworks for structuring learning experiences, right? Communities of practice, learning communities, peer-to-peer support. All of those are particular frameworks that yield particular outcomes as well. So I really appreciate that. And also, I think there's so much coming sort of down the pipeline in terms of new principles. I know there's a group of amazing scholars and practitioners working on a book around anti-racist principles for community engagement. And I think actually that's maybe being co-published by Stylus and Campus Compact. I hope I'm not wrong about that. So that's the other exciting thing, is that there's always sort of new scholarship and practice that we can grasp onto and kind of figure out how to integrate, which is one of the fun things about this work, I think. So my next question is thanks for confirming, Clayton. My next question is about how do you make faculty development programming accessible and enticing? And this question really comes from, we know that human beings in general and faculty in particular are very busy, have a lot of competing priorities that they're trying to grapple with. And of course, a lot of those are being dictated internally by their departments or their own particular place in their professional trajectories. And part of what we sort of have to figure out, which kind of gets back to barriers and motivators, is really how to create programming that faculty feel like they can be part of, that they want to prioritize, and that is worth their time and energy. So would love to hear from all of you about, how do you attend to that, and what does that look like in your faculty development?
I had mentioned a little bit earlier about our faculty council on community engagement, which I think we took a lot from the model that USF uses, what STAR uses up north. But what we've done is been able to really identify faculty members from all of the different departments and schools or across campus that are really committed to doing the work. We're able to offer them some professional development dollars and some support on some of the projects that they're doing, but mostly they're doing it because of some of the things I mentioned before. But because each academic unit and school has their own kind of jargon, for me to be able to adequately talk to a business faculty member or an engineering faculty member about the values of community engagement is diminished considerably, because I just don't have that expertise, versus if I have a faculty that is committed and knows as much about community engagement practices as I do, because they've been working with us. So we do focus a lot of energy on our council and not just having them do things for us, but creating opportunities for them to get professional development in community engagement field, so that they can take that back to their specific departments. And they're the ones that are going to be able to identify them. They're the ones that are able to actually have the conversations with them, encourage them to come to this workshop, or we have a principles of community engagement faculty development workshop we have actually scheduled for next week. It's a general one, but we also have versions of that if Odesma wants to do it for engineering. We will have one specifically for those particular schools, and I feel like that makes it accessible. Enticing wise, we also partner really closely with our Center for Educational Excellence in ways that help us, is minimal, provide food, an occasional stipend for opportunities for them to participate in a workshop or a community tour or visit. And the last enticing thing, and something that I also think makes it a little bit distinctive, is that we've used a kind of cohesion model where we invite faculty who have either have started one and want to develop their programs a little bit further to a place like New Orleans, where we have longstanding partnerships, or Portland or Jamaica, to where they can actually be excited about taking this trip, be able to work very closely with our partners who, we see as very much co-educators in this process, that keep it really real with them, and really help them and help push them to think about putting the community first oftentimes, because I think often we do focus on the tenure track, and these are the things that we need to express to our faculty to get them on board. But when you also have the needs of the community driving you, it adds a little bit more urgency into those conversations in terms of enticing them and saying that this is possible. I know you can have this great connection in the community and you can contribute greatly to those communities. And I feel like those things are not in our current currency of how we pay people, but it's currency nonetheless. I wish it could be, I mean, oftentimes we try to make it both if we can, but sometimes it's just about being able to make those connections and give people you know, the relationship, as Joyce was saying, like, you know, if it's all rooted in transaction and I do this, you do that, as soon as something goes wrong, I always say, you know, that program's done. But if you have a great relationship with them and it goes wrong, it's like, okay, well, let's not do that again. What are we going to do next? And I feel like that those types of distinctions, I think, are important in sustaining the work once you get them on board.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that we do to entice or to encourage is, you know, as the years have gone on, we've gotten more and more words into promotion tenure stuff, so it's working. But for years we have, we wanted to recognize, we had to value, that's why relationships were so important. But I mean, if the department's not going to value their work, well, we will from the center. So we give banners out that people hang on their office doors, and you'd be surprised how big a deal that is. And the banner that I made up was, my students are involved in the community, my students something something. And for those people that have, we don't call them service learning courses, we call them academic community engagement courses. It's very much like you were saying, John, give it a different, I don't like service learning, that verbiage, but we said, so if they've got one of these courses, they could hang the banner out. If they do community engaged scholarship, it says, my research is with the community, and they hang it outside their door. That's a big deal. I have a cup that we give to anybody that's involved in stuff, and I weaseled out on the from our campus that they would give free cups of coffee for anybody who has this cup. And so they would come. I can't believe how big of a deal. One of the guys in criminal justice said, my God, how'd you get that cup? I said, oh, don't you have an ACE course? Oh, too bad, so sad. You too could be in this special group and you get a free cup of coffee. He says, if I got one of those, it would raise my salary thousands of dollars a year just for a cup of coffee. But so we write articles about what people do. We send them to the chair, we send them to the dean, we send them to the provost, we publish in the paper. So we're always pushing out, you're great, you're valued, this is what we do. And I think that does a lot for enticement and encouragement.
Tessa or Doug, do you want to add anything?
I'll go. I mean, I will just say again, very similar to what other people have said. We do give out small amounts of money to support faculty fellows in their community engaged learning courses or in their public scholarship. We also have a slightly larger, still a small grants program that people can apply for. But I like some of these other ideas that are being thrown around, so I'll just mention a few other things. We really like sponsoring folks to attend conferences. So I like the professional development piece. We've started getting in a habit of trying to nominate these folks for both internal and external awards. So, you know, like Joyce said, if people are not going to value this, we'll show that we do value it. And we also, around the promotion and tenure piece, while we've been working on sort of the policy level changes that need to happen, we also have been collecting example statements from community engaged scholars who are willing to sort of share and coach other faculty in how to write that work into their evaluation statements. So we now have sort of a bank of examples that we are able to give access to the faculty in our program. So if they need an example of, you know, how do I talk about this in my statement in a way that's worked for other people, they have those examples.
Doug, do you want to share anything before we move into Q&A?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, I know for us, we look at it and it's the community of scholars you get to engage with during the FLCs and even outside of the FLCs. Our FLCs are facilitated by the Community Engaged Learning HIPS designated faculty member too, as well as the director will help facilitate those. So it gets faculty involved. As I mentioned earlier, we have the Community Engaged Learning Associates. There's 5 or 6 faculty members dedicated to the practice. We meet every couple weeks and we have objectives at the beginning of the semester, as well as the academic year of things that we're just trying to accomplish over the year. I know the other thing that we do here, which is great support, we've mentioned funding before, are mini grants. So the office and the directors put together some mini grants to really reinforce some of the practice. For instance, to ensure reciprocal partnerships, there was a grant that you could apply for to get some money, and you would fill out your community partner form, and it had to be authored by both you and the partner to demonstrate that reciprocity and stuff along those lines. We also have training sessions. We introduced Give Pulse. It's called Rock Serve here at the university. And we offer training sessions for faculty members that want to get involved, even for new faculty to explore potential community partnerships. And honestly, it's opened up some scholarship opportunities. I know I've connected with a couple faculty, and one in education and one in physical therapy, that we're actually authoring a paper together right now and doing some research. So, and the last for the promotion, the OSO puts out a newsletter once a month to really highlight and kind of announce, like, here's some great things that we're doing on campus. So
Thanks, everyone. Just to summarize what I heard, and I just want to lift up, obviously for those who have funding and provide mini grants or some form of stipends, that's always helpful. Where that might not be possible, how do you do recognitions, big and small, internal and external, to really let faculty know that their work is valued, even if it might not be reflected in how other parts of the institution see their work. The focus on relationships as a value in themselves, right? Feeling connected with people that share some of those motivations and values. Access to resources and development. I always feel like we're so lucky to work with faculty who are oriented toward community engagement, because it's like they want to continue to improve and iterate on their work, and it's so fun to get to engage with that. And then also potential for new scholarship opportunities that might emerge. So I think those are some great ways to entice faculty to be involved. So I want to move into our Q&A. We have a few questions that have been pulled from the chat. The first one is from Jessica Hodge at University of St. Thomas, who really wants to hear more about the Faculty Fellows Program at UC Davis. And you mentioned this a little bit, Tessa, about how faculty are compensated. What does that look like? And how are they selected to be fellows? And then I think you said they meet monthly, but if you want to give any more details about that program.
Certainly, and actually it sounds like it's similar to Doug's program. So Doug might want to also answer these questions, but yes, ours is a 6-month program, meets monthly, and we give faculty $1,000 in support funds. So, I mean, I think that's meant to hit sort of a sweet spot of supporting their work, maybe supporting what they need for their classroom or their publications. But, to your point earlier, Star and others, like the main emphasis of the program is not money. It's actually building a community of practice. And so I think faculty who opt into it are opting in not for the money, but for the collegial community of practice. And we basically openly advertise these, months in advance, and we have an application deadline, and we select them. We're looking for a range of different disciplines, a range of different people working on different things, and we're looking to make sure they're really they're like appropriate fits for the program. But so that's sort of the selection process.
yeah, very similar. While we don't have the funding for that, we do try to find from different disciplines. The director sends an email to all HIP designated faculty and pulls interest, and then through the FLCs, you can usually see some faculty members that are really looking to dive a lot deeper. I mean, that's how Jeffrey identified me through the FLC and encouraged me for the fellowship and then the associate. So usually we can discover them, whether it be through their work in the FLC, the work they're doing around campus, or they're reaching out to us with interest to participate as a community engaged learning associate.
Do others want to comment on kind of faculty outreach and selection for your development programming? If there are criteria you use or anything like that?
Well, we just started a new thing called the ACE Fellows, the Center Fellows, because we're trying to extend the bench. I don't have faculty lines, but I need people that are interested in working with us. So they get a course reduction each semester and they get $5,000 at the end of the year. It has to be, they have to apply for it. And this one is run through the deans. So the deans decide, I give them a list of people that have been teaching and are engaged, and they call on faculty that they can give a load assignment to, because that's a deal. And then they have to apply. And then we're in the process of selecting from that application. We're only going to do 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring and 2 in the fall. But I've got to extend the bench here because, you know, I'm old and we need to get other people, you know. And so anyway, we're setting the bench up for that sort of thing. So that's another idea.
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, it's great to hear what Doug and Tessa are doing with theirs. I feel like we had an iteration of that, which I would have chalked them to like one of those failures that I was mentioning earlier. We didn't do any of the things that you all do. So kudos to you all. But I think we had it laid out to where it was, you know, financially incentivized. It's like, you know, once you create your syllabus, you get $500. Once you meet your partner, we staggered all these things, and it really did draw people in. But I think what it did was show faculty that this is a lot of time and a lot of work, and we didn't give them a reason to do the work. It was more like the reason was the money, and then once they did it, they did the class once, and then they just didn't do it anymore because it wasn't incentivized the way it was. So just in terms of like, you know, finding that balance of like, you know, motivation and incentivizing with like, you know, currency, I think it would have been helpful. And again, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a complete failure, but just be one of the things to be mindful of from our perspective.
Yeah, John, it's so interesting because I have had something similar where, because we pay faculty $1,000 for completion of our fellowship program, and we were having a lot of, I think, department chairs kind of use it as a way to like supplement pay for adjunct faculty members. And so they'd be like, oh, you know, do this fellowship and then, you know, you can teach one of our courses, but sometimes they wouldn't end up teaching the course. And I sort of started to realize like, oh, this is kind of a thing that they're using to find pay for particular people. And you know, obviously there's an issue there that needs to be solved, but I don't think the Faculty Fellows program for community engagement was meant to be the answer to that. But moving on to the next question, there's a question here.
Let me say one more thing, Star.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have at the university is most all universities, I think, have university awards for teaching, research, and service. Isn't that right? Most universities have these university awards. Well, we have teaching, research, service, and community engagement. And you can only be nominated for that if you've taught academic community engagement courses. Mm-hmm. And so that in itself is a funnel, and it shows the institution buys into it. So it's a bigger incentive that doesn't come out of my pocket.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. So where is the institutional support that you can kind of draw on to? There is a question here going back to promotion, tenure, and review, and any solutions that you all have found or witnessed at your institution in terms of making community engagement more recognized and able to be assessed in tenure, promotion, and review. Anyone crack that nut here?
We're trying. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tessa.
No,
Please.
go for it, John.
I would say we're trying. We definitely haven't cracked the nut yet. Kind of what I was speaking about earlier, like that culture change. Like, how do we get it instilled within the university as a whole that this is a value add is important. So I think we're kind of taking that approach in terms of like aligning ourselves with the Place-Based Justice Network, being a change maker campus, showing the value of what that is. And I know that's not the only things we're doing. We're attending a lot of these workshops that have that specific title in them themselves. But I feel like they're, it's kind of one of those congruence things. I find that, there's a definitely the amount of effort that goes into putting in this work versus the rewards of it is not there, and what it represents to the university, because as much as they use the community engagement opportunities as opportunities to share publicly the great things that we're doing, it's not valued the same way. So that's not an answer to the question. That's a clear deflect, but I'll cast it to Tessa.
So I have sort of a similar, I was going to say, we have a framework of the trajectories we're working on, which I'll share. So like others on this panel, I think we've been working pretty hard on the sort of policies and procedures and trying to make some changes at the policy level and making progress on that, but like still moving that along. And while we're doing that, we've taken sort of two additional approaches. One is directly with faculty. So providing guidance, language, and examples of and coaching of how faculty can navigate this process. And then the second, like John was just talking about, is essentially a campus-wide culture change, right? And so we've been doing a ton of communicating about this. So presentations to deans, presentations to faculty, presentations to department chairs, basically developing sort of a 1-hour workshop that we can do on demand to groups of department chairs who want to know how to support their faculty doing this work. And so we see this as a big sort of, university system-wide communication goal and a conversation that we need to be having at our university. And that's, I think one of the realities and the hard parts about that is that that's really a long road, not a short one.
Tessa, I was just going to say, I really appreciate that because, as I've looked at some of the scholarship on changes to tenure and promotion guidelines and bringing in explicit ways of assessing and evaluating community engaged research and teaching, a lot of the institutions that have managed to get something like explicit language into guidelines and processes are still finding there's a gap in how it's actually applied, right? And so I think that kind of speaks to your approach of there has to be really like a culture and community organizing shift and approach to it, where people really deeply understand it, because just the written sort of having it written on a page doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make its way into the actual peer review or evaluation process. Doug, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you want to add?
Oh, no, I just saw then Amy's question here, just to kind of go off that. I mean, we obviously adopted GivePulse a couple of years ago, and we call it RockServe. And from the student side, the transcripts for the students for their community engaged learning and their impacts to what the faculty are doing. That's one of the things that we're starting to look at, is using that data as part of our narrative for tenure and promotion.
If I could too, just to add something salient to what I was sharing before and to connect with what Doug's saying, we use Collaboratory, or we've been using Collaboratory. We're looking into GivePulse as well. But one of the things that Collaboratory does well is kind of parse out community engagement versus public service using the Carnegie definitions. And last year we were able to kind of get through our faculty senate 2 course designations, so we can start to distinguish the 2 different things, because I do feel like it was a step that our faculty council said, like, this could help us in the long run when we have these designations and clear definitions of what the difference is, because I think some people conflate, oh, I have my class go out and do a beach cleanup, and they'll say, like, that shouldn't count toward, and that's not what we're doing. And so to be able to have a distinction between the 2, I think can be helpful. We're hopeful that it will be helpful in this process.
All right, there's one last question that I'm hoping we can kind of whip around and everyone can answer quickly before we move into our breakout rooms. The question is, where is your center housed within your institution? And do you receive support from higher administration? So maybe you can each kind of succinctly answer those two questions before we transition to breakout rooms.
Oh, I'll do that. Hi, Susan. Sorry. I didn't answer your email, but anyway. So we are directly under the provost, under academics, and the people who run the center, me, we're faculty. So we speak to faculty in ways that staff can't. So that's where we're housed. And do we receive support? You betcha. You betcha.
So, and Joyce was actually just saying new president and new provost, and both seem very aligned with community engagement. So at this moment in time, you have great support.
Well, and always, I mean, we were started by the provost, the center. So that's huge. And it goes back to what you were saying before, Star. It has to do with the culture of the institution. Where does this go? It's difficult to run a center under student affairs. It's just personal, but I think it's stronger under academics because the work we do has to do with teaching, it has to do with research, and it has to do with service. We cut across all three. So it needs to be under academics.
For the most of the history, we were lodged under academic affairs under the provost. But when Dr. Jim Harris became our president, let's say 6 years ago, he's a big community engagement advocate. So yes, we definitely have upper administrative support, but he created an institutional effectiveness and strategic initiatives VP and a whole different line and moved us over there. So we are, I think we have an AVP for community engagement, Chris Naive, who has a direct report to the president. So we're have really clear communications and support often.
We are also in the provost office. We're a standalone unit in the provost office. And so yes, we do have resources from upper administration, and there are 7 of us in the office, and it's a mixture of faculty and staff. I am also a faculty member like Joyce.
We were, the Office for Community Engaged Learning was not too long ago under the Associate Provost for Transformational Experiences, then moved under Provost for Academic Affairs, and most recently has been housed and partnered with the Office for Global Engagement. So we're kind of moving things around a little bit here as well.
Thanks, everyone. All right, we wanted to make sure we have a little bit of time left for our breakout rooms so folks get a chance to engage with each other. We know how important that is. And we have some prompting questions for our breakout rooms. I'm going to put them in the chat. I always say that these are questions that you can take or leave. You might get into your room and need to have a different conversation with the folks who are there related to what you've heard in the panel. But if you need some prompts, then hopefully these will kind of get you started in your conversation. Tessa, John, Doug, and I will be facilitating the small breakout rooms, and we'll probably spend about 15 minutes in those, and then we'll come back for the last 5 minutes. We'll come back together, and Clayton will close us out. So questions are in the chat, and then that will also be a chance in our small rooms for you to share resources or other things that you're using, and the facilitators of the breakout rooms will be curating and saving those resources so that we can share them back out with the whole group after the webinar. All right.
Hey, all, welcome back. I hope you had some good discussions in the small groups. It's really nice, I'm sure, to have some time for just a few of you to be able to talk and get into more depth around this. Star, I'm gonna throw back at or any of the panelists if you have any sort of final words in the next couple of minutes to talk through or to share or to sum up. I'll leave it open.
Thanks, Clayton. Well, I will just say, kind of bringing back something that we were just talking about in our breakout room is just kind of one of the new challenges. It didn't come up in our conversation today, but it's something I'm grappling with around, faculty rightfully kind of being more strict about the boundaries that they have on their own professional commitments. And I find that I'm struggling more to get folks to say yes to being on panels or being on committees for us, or joining faculty development programming. It seems like a lot of people are, their responses are like, I'm trying to say no to more things. And I feel that personally too, in terms of trying to set more boundaries, but I think it creates an interesting challenge. And my sense is that other folks are kind of experiencing that as well. But anyway, how do we sort of manage that dynamic that's coming up? People creating boundaries as they should, and that means less time for doing community engaged work, perhaps.
Well, great. I know we're just about at the end of the time, unless somebody has a last comment. Great. Before I give thanks to everyone who came out today, I just want to say we have pretty much monthly events now from now on around faculty development. I put a link in the chat about some of those some things that will be upcoming. On that page, you'll see at the bottom, there's an upcoming workshops. We have a workshop coming up in October on different strategies for facilitating dialogue and deliberation on campus and with students that Nick Longo is overseeing, but will similarly be a panel of folks talking about some of those models. And then Star will return and facilitate a group in November on engaging partners as coeducators, who I know a lot of you signed up for, saw that when you signed up for this workshop. So those are some of the things coming up, and we hope you'll join us again. And I just want to quickly take a moment to thank Star for her work, as well as John, Tessa, and Douglas, and Joyce, and also Nicole Springer from Campus Compact behind the scenes, who's been really helping out with this. Thank you all for being here, and all the folks who showed up today and stayed with us. Thank you very much. And we hope to see you again at a workshop in the next couple of months, and hope you'll join us.